Okay, I'm going to try this again. It's my sixth attempt trying to create a decent video. I ran out of space my last time. First few times I had video problems on YouTube and the presentation was much too short. I'm trying to do something decent as far as doing a presentation for wine. And just talk about some basic things. I guess I'm going to start with the overall outline of what's involved. First, I'll start with why would you even want to use wine? Well, if you're using Linux or even the Macintosh, actually, you can use wine as one of several means to get the program to run in that environment. And I guess, okay, so in the Linux environment or the Mac environment, specifically in my situation, I'm talking about Linux and talking about January 9th, 2012 with Ubuntu 11.10, which is my situation. I just wanted to start off by saying that I'm not an expert by any means. There's people that have far more expertise than I am, than I do, such as Don Cagle, some of the developers of the Wine Project, things like that. But I guess I'm going to go over some things that new users might want to know or may be able to use to their advantage, that I've used in the past to get various things to run or half run in my system as time goes on. That's the reason why you want to use wine. And the reason why you want to use wine is because you want an application to run that's not available to you generally in Linux, or it doesn't work the way you want to, or it has a special format you need to read files from, or you need it to do a certain thing. Like for the accounting industry, we have tax programs we need to run that we certainly don't have in Linux. We have some trial balance and write-up packages that we don't have the equivalent of in Linux, and so that's why you would run wine. The reasons why you wouldn't run wine or shouldn't run wine is if the package has already been ported over to Linux, don't mess with wine. Just get the package and install it natively in Linux. Use the package manager. Some cases I've gone into the wine database and I've seen packages that are actually, like Firefox. I mean, there's no reason to run Firefox in wine at all. Firefox has already been ported over and works fine in Linux. There's no need to do it. So we're talking about programs, Adobe Flash. You don't really need it to run in Linux, or if you really have to use Internet Explorer, well, you don't really want it that badly, because I'll tell you, any version of Internet Explorer you get running in wine is not going to be as good as the Firefox you're going to get natively in Linux, or the Opera, or the Chromium. So in situations where you have other choices, don't even bother trying to do it in wine. The whole point behind wine is to be able to run things you wouldn't be able to run otherwise, even under the best of situations. Now, I'll start out by saying that if someone were to walk in with a random piece of software and ask me if I can get the program to run in wine, I would give them, and I didn't have any information about it, I would make a flat statement that I'd say something like, well, there's a 75% chance it'll look like it'll install, and a 20% chance it'll run right. And I would say that's true for most programs. The chance that it will actually run right after it looks like it'll install is anywhere from 25 to 80%. That depends on the age of the software. The older the software, the more likely it's going to run. Also, I also want to comment on what the chances are as if you can't get it to run or it doesn't work right. What are the chances are in the future that it's going to actually work? Well, the more mainstream, or not mainstream, the more universally demanded the program is, the more likely it actually will run for you in the near future if it doesn't run now. The more obscure it is, the more less likely it's not going to run for you in the near future. So, for example, Microsoft Office, if you've bought the latest shiny new version of Office, I don't know, I'm just going to make it up, 2012. I don't know if one came out, but if it didn't, fine. Pretending that there was an Office 2012 that came out and you try to install it and it doesn't run the way you want it or properly in Wine, probably in a couple years that'll be working. If you're trying to run something like Caseware, that's industry-specific accounting program or some engineering-specific program, chances are it's not going to run with the way Wine is right now. There's a good chance it won't. Now, there are some obscure reasons why certain things will run, and that is if the underlying runtime components or dependencies for the program, or DLLs or other things that the program relies on that Windows supplies natively, is already in there. It just happens to match up with something that's mainstream like Office, or you're in luck. It'll work. You know, the people at Wine may not even know your program will work. It's always worth a shot, but in general, chances are your program's not going to work. If someone were to walk into my office and say, "Can you get Lacert 2011 running in Linux?" I would say probably not. If someone were to walk in the office and ask me if I can get Lacert 2006 to run, I would say, yeah, it's a good chance. So I would say that in general that Wine is about anywhere from a few years to about 5 years behind on running your Windows program, and it's probably not going to be as well as it would have been that you're used to in Windows. Something in the background may not work, such as mail merge. Surprise, surprise. The one mail merge you do a year, 8 months down the line, may not work in Office. But it may be able to do a lot of other things that you're used to doing every day. So keep all that in mind. Wine just isn't strong enough as a base. The combination between the demand of Linux users is probably the most, about 5%, maybe 10% of the population will try Linux once. 1% of the population will stick with it. And of those people that actually need to use Windows to do specific programming tasks for whatever specific industry they're in, such as mine is accounting, I would say there's only about a 25% chance that all the apps that you need will actually run under Wine to fill in the gaps you're missing in Linux. And that's not even counting all the underlying problems that happen with Linux without any Windows apps being thrown in there. Every time you upgrade, usually something goes wrong. I've talked about this many times. My latest adventure is with DOS-EMU and GVC Viewer, but if you work through it, you overcome it, but it's always going to cost you a few 2-3 hours. All that time adds up, and you have to really want this more than the value of it monetarily to go with it. Until such time that Linux gets to pass that, most people aren't going to adopt it anyway, with or without the help of Wine. But assuming everything was correct, you still would only have about, at the most, 40% coverage of the people that actually want to use, Linux exclusively by using Wine to run their other apps. So, in general, on any app that you pick up, for the most part, it'll probably look like it'll install. Chances are good it probably won't run correctly in its entirely, completely, in the ways you're used to using it. And chances are it's probably not going to get much better, because the focus of the people that are working on Wine are already trying to get it caught up with the newest releases of the most popular programs that are out there. And some they don't even support. That's the way it is. So Wine really isn't an answer, even for me, even though I got a lot of icons on my desktop. Some of those programs run to the extent that they serve my purpose, but I can't really say that they're going to be completely good in every case. the case, and it's gotten worse in the past few years. So as the we should say the variety of Windows versions that are released becomes more fragmented, not only do you have more choices when you're setting Wine up and installing programs into Wine, but also that fragmentation kind of breaks things that used to work. So the best example I could think of is Family Tree Maker 16, and I've been using Family Tree Maker 16 in Linux for a number of years, and it's only been in the past 2 years that I haven't been able to register the Family Tree Maker that I have installed under Wine, and as a result I haven't been able to use the search feature online to be able to search a subject person and look at the results and then click on it and go to directly to Ancestry and view the result that I desire. So I have, and since, let's see, about 2001 or maybe about 2002, it was a big deal that QuickBooks 2001 was running in Wine. But the latest version I can get running now is 2003. Yeah, you can get Internet Explorer running, but it doesn't really matter because you have Firefox. And in general, the end goal that I have and the philosophy that I have is basically, if I want a Windows replacement, the bottom line is I want to make sure I can do everything, but I'm not prevented from doing anything I need to do my job to use Linux. It's not whether it's pretty or if it's the brand you like. It's more like, and Firefox really isn't ugly to say that, but that's part of the whole thing. Now, a couple other caveats to do with Wine. There's some pieces of software that come bundled with drivers for hardware, and it used to be, one good example is back in the old days we had Palm Pilots, and so the Palm or Handspring visors, and the Palm or Handspring would give you software that you could use that would have a calendar, that would have a driver for a Windows driver for the Handspring visor, and it also had the ability to hot sync the records between your calendar and the visor if there was some kind of extension for the program you're using. The program comes to mind that I'm talking about specifically is Lotus Organizer. So we used to be able to stick the Handspring visor in the cradle, push the button, and it would sync up with the contents of Lotus Organizer that was on our network. Well, you have to have an add-on for Lotus Organizer, and then you have to have the Handspring visor component. Well, the specific application to that, and the whole end goal that I'm really talking about is being able to use Linux as your desktop. For one, yes, you can install Lotus Organizer. That's not a problem. You probably can install the software that provides that supposed link between the whatever signals the Handspring visor sends to the Lotus Organizer via Windows internal hardware mechanism to get the data out. But that mechanism that works in Windows, that talks between the Handspring visor and the calendar, isn't going to work in Linux because it has a different set of internal mechanisms that will communicate between an external device and your software on the desktop. So there are some pieces of software that aren't really appropriate to install under Wine, and those are mostly things that kind of come bundled with your hardware. The good news and the bad news about Linux is, for the most part, you're going to find someone that's been interested in getting your piece of hardware to run. And there's probably been a driver, and it's probably already in the kernel, and you probably don't even need to do anything but plug your device in to get it to actually work, in as much as that it's recognized by the kernel as being there. The next thing you're going to have, of course, is some kind of graphical user interface that knows how to talk to the Linux kernel and communicate the data back and forth, just like the other Windows program did. So the situation we were in trying, in looking at, we would have to change our calendar program. We would need some calendar program that would both in general would be able to hot sync up between the visor and in Linux. And so, you know, we found them one that could be read on the network and could be editable, but until such time that we were completely in Linux, we had to use one of those for Windows. And so in the meantime, I did install Lotus Organizer just so it could read and change the calendar, but with the understanding that the hot-sync cradle wasn't going to work. Well, that isn't the case now. We don't have a hot-sync cradle. You know, we don't do it that way, but back in the day that's the way it was. But it serves as a good example. So the CD that comes with your HP printer, you're not going to stick that in and use Wine to try to install your printers. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to look for, first you got to find out, well, what software, what project is working on HP printers, and in our case happens to be HP Lip, and so yeah, we can print, and we're just fine with 2 of our printers there. In some cases, you don't need any software at all. In some cases, it makes no sense to install the app you're interested in Wine because there's a native Linux app, such as Adobe Reader 9 or Flash, things like that. So you're really down to things that don't interact with hardware in general. And also for this camera, for example, if I took the Logitech QuickCam software, popped it in there, and got it to install in Wine, it doesn't mean that when the program runs, my camera is going to be controlled by the Logitech software. I don't know. It might, but I really highly doubt it, and I never used it that way. So it's down to really, that narrows the field down of what's appropriate to install in Wine. So you got to ask yourself, 1, is there an application in Linux that'll do the same thing I want to do? Do I really need to install this app? Why am I saying that? Because Wine doesn't work all that great. Yes, you can run Internet Explorer 6 and 7, and you can do whatever you want with them. But at the end of the day, it's like a waste of disk space because you already have a browser there. Now, there is a lot of disk space out there, I know, and you do have luxury of that variety, but it doesn't really accomplish anything towards independence from using a Windows platform, say, for example. Wine does that. And in some cases you have to have Internet Explorer to run the program you want anyway, but that's a different issue. Now, for newer users, there's 2 things I should talk about, and I've already alluded to one of them that can go wrong while you're trying to use Wine when it might possibly have gone okay for you. And that is basically if you have Wine from your regular distribution, all you really want to do is you want to open up your console and just type Wine CFG, press enter, let the GUI come up. Click on drives and just select auto detect and say OK. If you do that, you'll be able to install apps you wouldn't have been able to install. And I'm not finding that it behaves consistently. And then I got to talk about the Wine configuration and what Wine thinks it is. What the program Wine requires that you have everything you would have on a C drive in a folder that Wine thinks is the C drive, and usually that's the .wine folder in your home directory. But when it comes to network shares, like this server over here has files on it everybody looks at, and so if I want to use Lotus Organizer up in Linux under Wine to update the calendar for other people to see, I have to have not only the server mounted to a mount point, but I also have to have Wine configured to point to that the directory of the mount point and to call that some drive letter. And what I didn't see in this latest wine config that I just did with the auto detect is any entry for at all for my network share. So I know I have one, and it's right over here. So if it doesn't auto detect for you, go ahead and do that. Just make sure that any network share that you want to get to, first you have to figure out how to mount it, and that's a whole other topic, so I shouldn't get into it. But basically, there are ways to get a Samba share to automatically mount on each reboot and be accessible to users. And then the other thing I don't see here is I don't see any entries for a DVD drive. And usually that's in the media directory. Took a little bit there for my thing to mount, but so for this CD I've mounted. Now it's really unclear to me in my mind with these later versions of Wine whether you have to, each time you put a new CD in there, go into Wine config and make sure that that CD has been assigned a drive letter. But you may not, I don't know, and I don't have as much control over where things mount now because they're not using the FS tab system. So that could end up being a problem. So you want to make sure that, one, you have in Wine config all the things you're going to want to access. You want to have a drive letter for it. It includes thumb drives, that includes a CD, and that includes network shares. The other thing that can go wrong that is a little more complicated is that some of these programs require what are called runtime components, and that is those are pieces of software that the program needs, and it sometimes, if it's unfortunate for you, will assume that Windows already has installed, and therefore doesn't need to be installed for you, so it won't error out and tell you can't finish the install, you need this or that, so you'll never know it doesn't have it, and you'll wonder why your programs don't work. You can try various things. One standard thing to do is just to install Internet Explorer, but the only problem with that is that if you're going to do that, you're probably going to either need Don Cagle's Wine Tricks, if that function is provided by Don Cagle's Wine Tricks, or CodeWeaver's Crossover Office, which costs about, I gather, is about $40 a year. The downloads will always be available to you if you stop the subscription, but only up to the version that was released when your subscription ceased. Okay, and there are a lot of different runtime components. It could be .NET, it could be the JetTime engine, C++ redistributable, SQL, and if those things don't get installed and working properly in your fake Windows directory, which is some folder, probably the .wine folder in your home directory, under the subdirectory fake C drive, it's not going to work. Now, when you type the command in regular Wine, you go wine, and then setup.exe, like I'm going to do for this CD I got in here, just for demonstration purposes. It's a program from 2005, so it has a decent chance of running. There's setup. I'm just going to use that. you know, it works that way. That's how you install something. And Crossover works differently. You have to select the installer file or select the installer CD. Oh, brother. It looks like it's running, but God, if I know what it's doing. It worked the other night. What the hell? Try this one more time. Oh. Oh, here we go. Okay. Guess it was just thinking. How many of these do I got going? 5? So this is the kind of thing you have. Even this is from 2005. Getting all sorts of errors. I might end up having something or other, you know, look like it wants to run. There's an icon there, but it doesn't really mean much. Oh, what the hell happened here? It restarted X? Why? It's crashing and burning. Let's see what happens. It looks like something's going on. Okay, so it's giving me some kind of DAO error. Most of the time I don't mess around with these things, really. I really don't. And I'm done. No, just kidding. Okay, so you can see even from 2005, it really isn't working all that well. Right? And, you know, I'll probably have a better success, let's tell you now, trying to set something up in CodeWeavers. It'll probably look like it'll install. It won't give me any hassle, and you know, during the installation. But when it's all over with, all said and done, when I try to run it, who knows what will happen? Then you end up having a lot of wasted disk space. I'm just trying to talk you out of this as much as I can. Now, another thing I guess I should just mention. Okay, so out of all this stuff, what am I actually using? Nothing. I mean, nothing. I mean, this QuickBooks 2003 is 9 years out of date. Well, Cert 99 doesn't, it works, but not all that well, so I have it somewhere else. DosCMU works fine for Lacert, but not this. Family Tree Maker, that's the only one I use, and that's just to look stuff up now. I don't do any work in it anymore. It had one bug: it would crash if you tried to edit the notes. If you go in there and you'd scroll down instead of just pasting in, it would crash. But now that I only have search, I don't even do any work with that. Really, none of these things really do anything for me. I would say the chances of Wine wasn't even this far behind back in 2002. It's steadily gone back. As new things get released, Wine is just not able to keep up. But back in 2002 and 3, it was exciting because Wine was close. It was only, in my judgment, one release behind most of the software that you wanted to use, and you had 4 choices as to which one you wanted to use. So you can, you had regular Wine, you had the CodeWeavers Wine and the GUI, you had WineX, which tragically is gone now. All you can do is you have to sign up as a developer, and I don't know how much that costs or what the requirements are. I haven't even bothered. But it was a fork from the other wine, and so it provided some things that the regular wine doesn't. But you had to pay $5 a year, but who cares? And then there was a Linda's version that eventually got merged back into regular wine, which is why MS Office 2000 probably has a gold medal next to it now. One of the few things in CodeWeavers. And I'll just take a look at some of the things that CodeWeavers supports to the extent that they say it works. And in CodeWeavers 10 at least. And none of these releases I've been impressed with, and I'm not really impressed with the way they do bottles a lot of the time, because so many programs require runtime components, and it just assumes that once you install one thing you want to make a new bottle. Unless you take action on your own, it's easy to make a mistake and not have your and I was one of the bigger supporters of wine. I'm a big supporter of wine. If I thought that wine would be able to keep up with the programs that are released, and on top of that encompass and embrace new programs that that weren't supported before, and the progress was steady, and they were always just right on the doorstep, I would be full on just really jumping up and down and saying, why don't we just give a little more money and we'll be over the hump. But it's not really that way. So the variety of things they have here, they've got, let's see, Quicken 2011, QuickWorks Pro 2004, so that's, Quicken is caught up at 2004 is 8 releases behind. Microsoft Word 2007 is new. Okay, so I guess they support that. But then again, always remember that you have OpenOffice. I mean, it may not look. Someone sends you an OpenOffice file and you open it up and it doesn't look perfect. It doesn't spoil the whole bunch. And OpenOffice isn't as nice as Office in certain ways, but you can still do what you need to do for the most part. But you probably can't do a mail merge. That's one thing. But by far they support Microsoft Access Office. They've got Photoshop, a couple architectural programs. Mostly it's just QuickBooks, Microsoft Office as a whole, Internet Explorer, which doesn't really matter because you have Firefox, and then they let you do your service packs and upgrades and all that stuff, and build QuickTime 7, which is probably a few releases behind, and certainly it's not going to be able to get your files onto whatever device you're using. It's just going to be able to play QuickTime movies. And QuickTime doesn't have a native port for Linux, but so Office is redundant. So you start to look at all this and you're going, okay, what's the big deal? You get stuff like Lotus 123 from 1999 to run, and if that serves your purpose, then use it. It'll work fine. Lotus Organizer will work. You just can't hot sync your visor. But who has a visor these days? Not many people. I'm surprised if Palm even does that anymore. And that's it. So a lot of the time when you're using crossover Office for CodeWeavers, you're pretty much blindly, without any support from CodeWeavers, putting in a disk into the computer just to see if it'll run. And if it runs, then it always looks like it'll install, but the question is, will it run, and will it run right? And if it does run right, then you're in luck. And you're only in luck because it's using some of the same runtime components, or DLLs, as any of the programs here that they support, and it only will work as good as any of these they support. Out of all these ones they support, let's see, those are bronze, so I mean, what's supported to gold medal? Enterprise Architect 8 is the only one that they claim works just as good as it does in Windows. Excel 2000. So the only one, okay, getting back to the history of this, there was a Windows version of Wine that got molded, folded into regular Wine. And the reason why Office 2000, Excel 2000, and all four of those 2000 versions work to gold medal, according to Codeweavers, is because Windows put $10 million into subcontracting to pay for the development of that support. Microsoft ended up paying for that. Windows ended up changing their name to Linspire. Then they folded. Michael Robinson apparently got his money back, at least at that point. And so basically Microsoft paid for to get Microsoft Office 2000 to be up to gold medal now in Linux, indirectly. I mean, yeah, PowerPoint's the only one here that's gold. The rest are silver. So silver means, it almost works. Bronze means, it kind of works, but we think it's pretty much unstable. And these, we're just going all of these Microsoft. I don't know what Piafupu is. But the list isn't very impressive, as you can see. But anyway, if you really want to go with the Wine, here's my story. My story is that for tax year 2002, if it was tax year 2002 forever, when it won't be, I could run an accounting firm with Wine and Linux. But that's it. I can only get Lacert 2002 to work right. Read the files off the network and do what I needed to do. Otherwise, no. And I was really excited in 2003 early when I found that out. Although, of course, the 2002 tax year was over with. And during 2002, Wine hadn't matured enough to run Lacert the way it did in 2003. And I just couldn't wait for 2004 and 2005 because I thought surely they're going to keep up with the programs, and if people just pay for crossover Office, there'll be enough funding to have enough programmers out there to do something with it and keep up, and maybe the momentum's gathered, and but it never happened. A lot of the times there's problems with upgrade, problems with X, problems with sound in Linux, and so it just never went anywhere. So I'm doing a lot more complaining than I am actually providing information. But now I might have had a better chance to get this file cabinet solution software to actually run if I had used Don Cakel's Winetricks. If you ever want to start over with Wine, all you got to do is just go in here, for the most part, find your .wine directory, and what do you know, I've already done it. Already deleted it. Just right click, delete, you're done. Now, it's at least and good luck doing that in Unity, but at least in KDE4 you can actually do that. Okay, so I'm going to look to the Ubuntu Software Center for Winetricks and see what kind of impact that happens to have. What options are available. Basically, Codeweavers is kind of stopped, and they're saying, okay, well, let's make sure we get all these runtime components and stuff available and port it over, and that way we can get the apps ported. But the progress is just way too slow. And after waiting 10 years, I'm not impressed. I've given up on any hope of making any progress. I've really given up on any hope of any kind of industry or group of people deciding that they want to have a choice for employees within their profession to be able to use another operating system. They're look at the Journal of Accountancy. They have too many Microsoft Office tutorials to count, and they don't have enough things that are of practical use and good to CPAs, such as, say, setting up Samba. You could probably You can save a lot of money on that. It's a little more technical to set up an email server, but it can be done. And with the How-To Forge instructions out there, that's what got me over the hump. And yeah, I could set it. There it is. That thing serves as an email, FTP, and a file server, and the software cost me, could have been free, but I happened to want to buy it, so I bought a magazine with like 6 different Best of Linux, and like 60. It was like $20, and I've upgraded 2 times since with a simple command line. As servers, Linux is great, but on the desktop, it still needs help, and we're still close, but it's going to take a significant amount of money to get the programs we want to work in Wine. If it took $10 million to get Office to work up to the gold standard in Wine, then I would gather that any industry with $100 million could put enough money into Wine to get it working perfect for that industry. The thing about Wine is whatever industry pays for that, there'll be some other industry that'll have all of a sudden 60% of their apps running because, well, there's only so many DLL files in a Windows system. Right? And once they get all those DLL files working right, they're great. Another thing theoretically you're supposed to be able to do is copy all the DLL files from your Windows installation into your .wine folder, and then suddenly you're magically going to have all your programs work. I haven't found that that's the case, but I've been told that was the case. Now, there's settings in the Wine config. I think you have to choose whether you're going to use the native DLL or the DLL that comes with Wine. They've got the running down. It's now down to the point of whether it's all about the runtime components. And that's so there's basically in Wine, the prognosis of you actually getting your program to actually work is not that great, unless it's too old for you to actually use. And if it does work, it's probably not going to work right. If it doesn't work, it's probably not going to end up working right. If the most of the programs they got working great have decent substitutes for them, with only a few exceptions, such as Office has mail merge, and I'm not quite sure you can do a mail merge in Open or LibreOffice. And then the users could easily misconfigure their Wine and prevent themselves from actually using it where it otherwise wouldn't. But you can pay $40 a year and overcome that. CodeWeavers does overcome that. Cedega, any technology that was in Cedega, I think has been lost to the collective brain share that's trying to move forward, but the move forward is just too slow. Don Kegel's Winetricks is what I was going to do. Okay, so let me put in the Ubuntu Software Center. There it is, Winetricks. Do I have that installed? No. Do I? Okay, so I gotta figure out how to use this thing, because I've gotten rid of my subdirectory. I'm going to go to the developer website. Basically, you just search for Winetricks and click install, and you got it. Okay, how do you do this? Download it. I guess I just typed the word Winetricks. Okay, let's try this. Yeah. So it's going to do its own wine configuration. And I have There's the .wine folder. It's reappeared. Let's try and let's try installing an app. Let's see what it gives to us. 7-zip. Who cares? You have KArchiver. ABI Word, that is a piece of crap anyway. No one cares about it. Adobe Digital Editions. That might work. The Audible.com manager and player, that's important. I'll give him that much. Borders, okay. CMake. Why would anybody want to install Make when they got GCC? I don't know. Cygwin. Why would anybody want to install Cygwin in Red Hat? Cygwin is a program that allows you to have to be able to compile Linux programs in Windows and have a Unix-like environment when Cygwin is running. Firefox 5. Come on. KDE on Windows. Why the hell would you want to do that? Office, okay. We already have that. Opera. We got a native port for that. Python's native to Linux. Now Safari might be worth it if you want to try Safari. uTorrent, there's plenty of torrent programs. VLC, for God's sakes. That's native. So this doesn't really do much. Now these games, I think, is the main reason why you're gonna want to use it. Now I don't know the extent that they work, but obviously none of these games have anything. Yeah. Now with Winetricks, I guess if you want to have, does it even have Internet Explorer? I hate to bag on Darren Cagle, but I mean, if you really look at what's critical for people to be able to actually say, okay, I don't need Windows anymore, it's none of this stuff. You know, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not, you know, Don Cagle's done a great job with all this stuff. It takes a lot of skill, a lot more than I have to do what he's done, but I even think ABI Word you can install natively in Linux. Nonetheless, okay. A few other things I'll just go over. I had a few experiences where I got stuff to run where it wouldn't have run otherwise. So at one point, a couple years ago, I tried installing Lacert 2008, which is the last year of Lacert that we had bought here in Wine. And I didn't try Trends Gaming because, of course, I didn't have access to it. But I tried regular Wine, I tried the Code Weavers, and between the two of them, it just wasn't going to work. It would always fail on the attempt of the install. So I go, you know what, let me just try to install it in Windows and see if I can copy it over into my Linux partition. And then from that point, use Wine to Code Weaver's GUI to pick the exe file, get Code Weavers to launch it, and then have it place an icon on my desk for that exe file. And it worked. Not perfectly, but it was pretty damn close. But still, it requires a desk with Windows on it. You still need Windows at one point to do that. Why the install didn't work, I don't know. The only reason why it works is because I know Lacert's still kind of DOS based, or I'll put it this way: it's for the longest time, Lacert didn't need to make any writes to the registry to run in Windows because it was trying to be able to run in DOS at the same time too, and I think they just kind of carried that forward. And as time goes on, that's probably going to be less and less true. And I may not be completely right about that, but I got that feeling from it. That's why I was able to run without having registry entries. Most programs aren't going to be able to do that. Now, the other interesting thing that I had happen was that or the experience that I had, you can install Adobe 9 with regular Wine. It won't really install in CodeWeavers, but it will. As of now, this is January 2012. It's December 2011. You can do that. Adobe X is out now, but I have Adobe 9. And if you hack the registry before you even started the program to turn off the FlexNet, FlexNet licensing, did one other thing, it would actually run and keep running and never lock you out. Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't keep that situation. I have the Adobe on the other one. I'd rather have FlexNet running, because that's what Adobe wants. I mean, it's annoying as hell. I paid for the program. It's only here. I'm only running it on this desk, but nonetheless, they have their FlexNet. So without having to do that, and I forgot what the hacks were. I did a presentation on it. It just dies out because FlexNet tries to phone home, and there's something you can't get out into the internet. Internet Explorer under Wine can get off the internet, but for some reason the FlexNet can't get out, because I had the same license on my Linux as I did in Windows, but Linux told me no, and Windows didn't. I'm only running one of these at the same time, so it's not going to know all the other ones also running too. It may have a count of the number of times I've registered, but I've had to reinstall Adobe. I had to reset up my Windows after I thought I got compromised. I don't mess around. I just do the whole thing over again, and didn't give me a problem. So it could be that I'm never going to be able to register the thing again, or it could be that it's the FlexNet isn't running right in Wine, but Adobe does. And I think it's the latter, just on my general sense of things. So you might have that kind of problem where the program would run otherwise, but there's some little bugger in there that's going to screw you. One little part, and then you're just gone. And sometimes, to get the program to run, you just have to, even if it's installed in CodeWeavers, you have to use CodeWeavers Wine, but run CodeWeavers Wine from the command line. And you really got to be willing to try a lot of things. If you really want this to work for you, well, I'll put it this way. If you really want Wine to work for you, you better damn well have a lot of time in your hands and some programming skills. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to patch, code, and help create Wine yourself at the stage that things are in, just to get your programs working that you want to have run, if they don't work already. It's pretty much the way it is. And the reason why the installs don't fail, but the running of the program fails, because the installs don't really rely on your DLLs all that much. They're made to not rely on other components, except for what's on the CD. So it's just, like I was saying before, Wine has the ability to run the program if the DLL is proper there. In general, that's all worked out, and they're good. Everything's good there. It's just the fact that the DLLs, they haven't been able to re-implement and re-engineer exact DLLs in every case as you have in Windows. Now, some of the history of Wine includes, at one point, in fact, I'll just look it up this time because I'm already in. Where is my freaking homepage? At one point, and I'll give you the year in a second after I find it, there was only one there was only one Wine project. And let's see. Okay, originally, okay, So I had this wrong. Originally, Wine was released under the MIT license, which basically is the BSD license, which basically means do whatever you want with this software. Anything you want. Sell it, modify it, change it. All you got to do is, on any files that we've created, say that we made it. And underneath that, if you add something to it, make sure you give us attribution for what we did. Then, sometime let's see, yeah, about 2002 they decided to adopt the lesser GPL as the license, which basically is not as strict as the full GPL, but what it did is it doesn't really allow for people to modify the software without giving away the source code. And so one guy, Gabriel Straight, decided he was gonna check out his version of the CVS tree and go off, and he developed his own wine with his own license, which was a proprietary license, and that was called WineX, later Sedega, and later now that they've dropped support for Linux and they only allow people to check Sedega out of CVS momentarily. I'm sure there's no development on it, so it's a couple years behind the time. The additional features that WineX was able to provide is just not back in the tree, as far as I know. They put some things back in the tree in something called Rewind, but they really didn't get it back up to par. There's a lot of problems. Now, when they were working with, I'm just reading this stuff. They're still developing Cider, but that really doesn't do much. And Cider is for Apple, but it's not going to run in Linux. It's compiled for Apple, and it's more geared towards Apple. In general, I don't think Microsoft cares all that much because they know it just doesn't amount to much. And again, like I was saying at the beginning, only about 40% of the people that are even willing to try Linux, was about 5% of the population at most. So we're talking 2% of the population could probably be pulled out of and that's probably high, out of Windows and into Linux by enhancing the apps they don't have in Linux with what's in Wine. And basically, businesses are the only ones that should be really interested in Wine. It shouldn't be a home user. Most home users are adequately covered with what comes in Linux. They got their word processors, a whole slew of them. They even have latex editors. You got web browsers. You have games. Small games. We're not talking about, and the gaming. For personal, you're not going to be able to do any big-time gaming. For the most part, your hardware is going to be supported. And so Wine is just kind of like a bunch. And I used to be the biggest supporter of Wine, because I saw it. If it was actually supported full hard, if Windows was able to keep up the pace of improvements that they had at the time with Office, I mean, by now Wine would be pretty damn close to being a replacement. At an injection of about 10 million a year, this could do okay, but I really doubt that Codeweaver is doing much more than paying for Andre Julliard's salary and the president of Codeweaver's salary, if at all, and he's probably not making all that much money. I'm sorry to say, that's probably why they decided they were going to also support Macintoshes too, because they need a bigger base than the Linux base. Now you have other options. Again, I don't know if I don't remember if I said, I've done this so many times, I don't remember if I said this in the beginning, but you could get some programs, but it isn't worth the cost, was the other side of the argument. You can get some programs like Win4Lin or VMware that'll basically allow Windows to run as an application in Linux in both cases, or you can get VirtualBox or Virtual PC or things like that. VirtualBox is free, but you still got to pay for the Windows Lite. It doesn't really get real Windows. It just allows you to boot into one thing, but then both, when your Windows little box is running, your Linux is going to be slower, and your Windows is not going to be as fast as you'd like unless you have a top-of-the-line machine, and still the software keeps getting bloated, eating up all that extra CPU that you have, so still it's going to be slow. So I've never been big on virtualization, by the way, just to add. Now, I'm just getting stuff to run. If you're really desperate, try, what you do is you try all three. You try, or all, well, two now. If you're really desperate, I guess you can go to the Transgaming website and try to sign up as a developer. And if they have a fee for you to pay the damn thing, get Sodega, and you might get a little bit of a different response. I'm pretty sure this AOL here, I tried installing AOL with Crossover, and the AOL the install really didn't complete correctly, and that's unusual for Crossover. But with WineX, at least back AOL 5, which was one version behind, or two behind 7 when I said, hey, it works, it had other things that were developed that had not been developed in regular Wine that allowed it to run where it wouldn't run in regular Wine or CodeWeavers. You can get that. You can try getting it to run in there. You're also going to want to have a good 6 to 12 months of experience behind your back, 2 to 3 upgrades behind Linux. Expect to have problems. Rejoice you're going to have the problems, because that'll allow you to learn things about the underbelly that you're going to need to know to be able to run Wine or apply to try to troubleshoot problems that might come up. It's a pain in the butt. Also in Linux, well, one other thing that was unusual in a situation, I was able to get ProSystem to install, but it wouldn't run because it thought it needed to be administrator. But when I looked for help on this, at least amongst the discussions for Wine, they said, well, Wine always runs and it assumes that it is administrator, so the error you're talking about doesn't make sense. So anyway, that happens sometimes, and I don't know how to get around that. It's probably some kind of registry hack, but I just don't know what it is. So basically, I've tried to install Caseware, and even though I installed both runtime components that I knew I needed, which was a WebJet engine and C++ redistributable with it, it just doesn't run right beyond initially opening up. Part of this is the promise of what could be if an industry gets behind something. So if the CPA industry, say over a course of 10 years, for whatever reason, decided they wanted to pool their money somehow to pay Wine and Caseware International to work together to get the damn thing to run properly on an install, to figure out what the fuck the problem is and get it working into, I don't know, 10 years is kind of stretched out, but you see I'm trying to say, if $10 million got Office to work, then perhaps less than that might get one of these key apps, or ProSystem or Lacerte, to actually not have to need a Windows thing just to install, but run. And by doing that, it's not just for Linux, it's for the industry to have a choice. And by supporting Wine, it actually gives the industry a choice of running their apps in Mac OS X too. In any operating system that could run Wine, and that's most of them. The only one that I could think of that's not going to be able to run Wine, that's currently being developed, is Haiku. And that's only because I haven't seen anybody that's ported Wine over to Haiku. But we got Wine working in the Mac. So why not allow, raise some money for the industry to be able to actually deal with this? It doesn't look great. Well, sometimes in life, we're all CPAs and we just think someone's going to hand us a nice report and everything's going to be nice. Well, sometimes in life you got to actually earn something. And it's not a crisis by any means. We do have Microsoft doing stuff for us. But what if Microsoft fails? What are we going to do as an industry? Keep using our old apps and keep running the same old operating system until we get botnetted? Until the security patches aren't being released anymore, but the black hats are still releasing their, still hacking into things. And boy, that's a nice honeypot for the black hats accounting records, right? Whatever industry you're in, you're going to want to have. You look at Microsoft Financial State. Oh, I doubt that's the case. We should wait. We'll do it at the time. Well, okay, yeah, those are all arguments. But I just happen to be in favor of this one. And that's just basically giving accountants, or whatever industry you're in, if you're in the engineering industry, giving your industry the chance or the ability or the opportunity not to be stuck in one operating system. And wine isn't always going to be a looks good until you run it kind of situation. As you can see, there were some apps in there that were gold. And those are the ones they worked on specifically and focused all their attention on to get working right, and that was Office 2000, and it still works right now. And some of the effects on the other apps is that if they didn't put that much effort into Office, I can tell you right now, this case where Working Papers 2011 wouldn't even run. Now I'm going to try to open up the sample file. Yeah. Now I think it's going to crash when it tries to open. We'll see. Yep. But that could be as small as one DLL being bad. It could be a lot larger, but it could be that small. So the reason why I made my presentations on where are we is I was saying, hey, look, we got some stuff here. We're almost there. We haven't done anything, and we're almost there. We could put some money or some effort behind this and actually give ourselves a choice instead of having to always, we're always going to have to use Windows. We're always going to use Windows. I could save money on our servers, but I can't on our desktops. And why not? Now, there's some other issues to address, though, and I'm not. You may think, because I'm talking all this time about being able to use Linux this, Linux that, that somehow that I think that I'm living in some kind of dream world, and that a perfect operating system is going to be developed. I'm talking to the CPA industry specifically. That some perfect operating system is going to be developed, and no one's going to put any money behind it. I really don't think that's the case. Exactly. I know that this is pretty goddamn. Now, looking at this, I don't think Ubuntu's not making any money off me when I download these things. But look at all the things that I get that do work. Yeah, there's some annoyances, but there's a lot of stuff that works. So one would think if I were willing to pay $40, $50 for this Ubuntu, that would work better. Well, unfortunately, I'm not so sure. There needs to be a certain amount of saturation in the base of an organization, and a certain amount of concerted effort behind a project and someone with money behind, some of this invested money behind what's released to decide whether they're going to release it. So, for example, when I got this GUVC view, when version 1.4.5 was released, that was a disaster, and 1.4.5 ships with Ubuntu, right? Now, if there was a better way to get the information back to Ubuntu very quickly, and they can supposedly easily change their repository and put the 1.5.1 instead of 1.4.5 in there up on their server, that problem would be solved. And if they kept 1.2.2 on their server and didn't put 1.4.0 out, that would be solved. Those are two minor things that became major headaches for me, but on the other end, it's not that much. And so with some money and some coordination behind the whole effort, yeah, it could be a good and viable system, so long as if there's more effort put behind quality control testing before things are released. And the pace of Linux releases are too quickly. So before the AICPA, I'd be willing to jump on something like this. It's a lot to ask. Hey, let's put $1 million a year into this. Obviously, they would want to, and that comes down, well, is the AICPA going to have their own distribution? A lot of questions to answer. But basically, if they, say, contracted with Ubuntu to do an AICPA edition in which the release is first tested by members, and for the apps they want to run, or apps that are deemed to be critical to the core of use of the operating system, or within reason, then there could be another group that's less committed and more volunteer, not paid, but volunteer to test things like GUVC view. You might get something a little closer to a system you know is going to work every time. The one thing that's good about Ubuntu is I've never seen an upgrade do me wrong. Ever. It's easy. It's easy, it's free, you don't have to go anywhere, your internet connection, you're done. That's more modern than anything else you could talk about. So that's my pitch. I think that Linux is close. It could get there. Although I rant and rave about how much it sucks a lot, I think there could be some money put into quality control, and that money funded by paying for the distro, by people that use the distro. But you got to have more than just 100 ASC. You got to have thousands, and that's going to be the problem. To fund the quality control group, and that quality control group will more or less ensure that the problems that I have periodically, whatever it is, whatever version I'm dealing with, don't happen. Then you got a stable base. It's at least a plan, but I don't know if it's really going to work. Then you got to have more money behind the wine. There's a lot. There just isn't enough money behind Linux, is what the problem is. With OS X, you have that stable base. I guess in this case, Linux is just going to have to prove to people it's good enough to be used. We can at least give ourselves a choice to use OS X. If we put some money behind the line. We committed to giving our own industry, instead of putting all this money behind making our lives difficult, making us redo all of our financial statements, all of our audit programs, have twice as many paperwork to fill out for no different result other than a more rushed job and more incomplete papers. Come on. I mean, you think people are paying double the fees they used to for audits just because we decide we want to have some ethics checklist? No. So it's got to be that people are doing. I've seen a lot of audits come into this office where I've looked at the trial balance subsequently, compared it to what they had in their financials, and it's, I don't know where the hell they got half their numbers from. The numbers just don't add up. We're putting a lot of money into making our ability to actually do our jobs right less obtainable. But we're not doing anything to give ourselves some choice and independence and maybe some power. Power to decide what we want to do. That's it. That's my pitch, and I probably didn't cover everything I wanted to. It's probably much more negative than anybody wanted to, but I don't have the magic answers at this point. This is probably, every day it goes by, I get more and more cynical about wine and code weavers. Up to about 2 years ago, I just thought, what's the point of even renewing code weavers? Because I want to, on a release of code weavers, I want to see, I'm going to put my Lacert disk in, and this time the install won't fail, or that, maybe it won't run right, but maybe the next time it'll run right. So I'm not seeing that kind of progress. Instead, I'm seeing a bunch of new releases that are only work halfway, a lot of installs that don't work, so a lot of wasted disk space and time on the attempts to do the installs, but never any progress. And I got a lot of things to do anyway, so that's the thing. So yeah, I can click on QuickBooks Pro 2003 and damn thing will run, but that's 8 years old, 9 years old. So yeah, we're close. The current version of Wine will do that for you. And some applications are important, like Dropbox. They're already ported over. It just, again, it all depends on the age of the program and how closely it just happens to match to everything else. All that just fizzled out. I think it's because I probably deleted the Wine directory. Okay, I'm done.